Hello, and welcome to the Blue Shadow Podcast. My name is Joey.
I am Dan.
And today we are excited to discuss the Acolyte Episode 7 choice. But before we do that, I need to take a second to apologize. Not to Dan, but to May and Indara. Fictional characters, of course. But fictional characters that I was incredibly hard on. May, literally, with the exception of starting the fire, which she clearly regretted, did nothing wrong.
Yeah, I mean, May just tried to burn the book.
May tried to burn the book. They got a little out of hand, but she clearly was not the problem.
No.
And Indara, I totally thought they were setting her up to be like the problem, the catalyst of the problem.
They were.
Indara is not the problem. Indara arguably was the most by-the-book Jedi in this episode.
Kalnaka.
Yeah. Kalnaka wasn't hurting a fly.
Yeah, only Torben.
He was possessed, but we'll get there. So anyway, I did want to apologize for my very... I think I was going down the path they were leading me down, and I fell for it.
Much like all the fallen Jedi do.
Anything else there?
No.
All right. Go ahead.
Before we get into the episode, very briefly, what have you been up to?
Oh, yes. I have been diving more deeply into the High Republic books, which is exciting because there's a little call out for it today. I am currently... I finished A Test of Courage, the first book with Vernestra in it, and now I'm into the Dark, where I'm learning about a lot more characters, kind of this like offshoot of Light of the Jedi, which is very exciting. So I've really been loving reading the High Republic books.
Nice. It's exciting.
Mm-hmm. How about you?
My girlfriend and I finished Ted Lasso. If you haven't watched it and are in a feel-good mood, the show will do it for you.
He's talking to me.
I'm talking to everybody. Some people, actually, when they're recommended shows, watch them.
Yeah.
I'm just messing with you.
Yeah. How's The Last of Us 2 coming?
I actually put it right in my PlayStation 5 the other night.
I don't believe you. I'm just kidding. I believe you. Anyway, yes, it is on the list. It's next on the list, I promise.
For everybody listening, it's a very feel-good show, and if you have Apple TV+, it's worth the watch. It's only 3 seasons. It's wrapped up. It's a good show. But I've also been watching the X-Men animated show, and I want to get back into House of the Dragon. I'm seeing too much stuff on Twitter, and I'm like, I just need to see it.
I'm not a Game of Thrones person, not because I have any aversion to it. I just haven't been. So
it's something to get into. Like if you're gonna do it, just be ready to go full.
Like I like Lord of the Rings, and I feel like it has that sort of vibe. Not really. Maybe some more incest, probably, based on what I know of Game of Thrones.
Fair amount, yeah.
But yeah, that's what we've been up to. Anything else to add for what you've been up to?
No.
I would like... I have finished... We've kind of been dropping off of doing our little intro because we've been pressed for time the last few weeks. Mm-hmm. I have finished X-Men the Animated Series. I finished X-Men 97. Oh. And whenever Dan's done with it, I would like to talk about it on air a little bit.
Okay, I'm powering through 97. Not 97, I'm so sorry. X-Men Animated Series. Powering through it.
It's very good.
It is.
It's old.
I don't care about that.
It's some of its age shows, but I like it a lot.
Doesn't matter for me.
That's all right.
It's just getting there. It's a big, hefty...
It is.
Hefty little show.
They're 20 minutes, but there are a lot of episodes.
Yeah, so...
Speaking of short episodes, let's talk about The Acolyte, Episode 7, titled Choice. As we do, we like to talk about the meanings of the episodes. I do want to say that this is kind of a counterpart to Episode 3, which is called Destiny. And what do we think that this means? I'll let you take the floor first.
I think those two episode titles go hand in hand.
I agree.
And it's really posing the question, do we have a destiny? Or do we have free will, basically? Mm-hmm. I think that's how I interpreted it. Like, the choices we make have any effect on our destiny? Mm-hmm. And I think the answer is yes.
I am...
As we'll see, maybe.
I am big on... As I've mentioned before, I listen to Force Center podcast. If you're not familiar, you should listen to them because they're phenomenal. But they often talk of destiny as being like, it brings you to this point where you ultimately get to choose. For example, the example they use is like Luke Skywalker. When he's, Palpatine's electrocuting Vader, that's his destiny, to be in that situation. Mm-hmm. But he makes the choice to, put his lightsaber down. Mm-hmm. And that, I feel like, kind of comes into play here. And there are several different choices that are made throughout the episode. Yeah. So we don't need to belabor them here, but I think that concept of all these choices had to be made, And honestly, this episode is literally like, what if the worst case scenario of every single choice came to a head? And that is what happened on Brendok.
Yes. We, just speaking about it in the past weeks, we knew something went down. I mean, you said right from the beginning, after episode 2, where's the rest of the story?
Mm-hmm.
This is half the story you picked up that Torben had. Scars on his face.
Mm-hmm.
So, finally got to see it.
We did. And before we start into the actual story, I want to comment on something. I feel like I've been letting the internet get into my head lately. The last few weeks I've been throwing little things in.
Oh, no.
I've seen a lot of articles, including one from, I think it might have been Screen Rant. I'm not 100% sure, so don't quote me on that. But the articles and these tweets have basically said the Jedi are the bad guys now. And if you're of that mind, please let us change your mind. I imagine the Jedi are, and is this the case in the prequels, as in the case even in the sequels with Luke's perception, the Jedi are flawed. Yes. 100%. But the Jedi are not the bad guys.
No. It's everything. So I apologize for last week. I went off on some wild tangents. But I will say this. Kind of what we've seen in the Clone Wars, perspective matters.
Mm-hmm.
And while objectively the Jedi are not the bad guys, to us, the viewers of Star Wars,
mm-hmm.
the people who it was written for, George Lucas made them the good guys. I understand why some people would say the Jedi are the bad guys of the Star Wars universe. I'm not saying they are. For example, in Clone Wars, the Martez sisters,
mm-hmm.
I see why they don't like the Jedi. I see why they think the Jedi were bad people.
Yeah, and you could see why, if someone managed to survive this, might think that the Jedi are bad. But I think from a story perspective, it comes down to the intention.
The ideals of the Jedi are good.
Uh-huh.
The people are generally good, but they're just that. They're people. They all have free will. They're flawed.
I was going to
say they're humans. No, they're not all humans.
But the sentiment holds true.
They all can make choices. And like you said, this episode was about choices and what would happen if every single choice we made was the wrong one.
Yeah, so I did just feel I'm an avid Jedi fan. The Jedi are my favorite things in Star Wars. And I feel the need to say this show is challenging it, 100%. But the Jedi are not the bad guys. Capital letters, all caps, Jedi are not the bad guys. Again, Jedi have made mistakes. Clearly.
They did bad things.
But it's all about the intention. Speaking of, why don't we jump into the story? So this is, as we talked about, the Jedi perspective of what happens in episode 3. That's the flashback episode where we learn about the events on Brendok from...
Was that episode 3?
It was episode 3.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I've been saying it was episode 2.
It was 3. 2 was the second one that we saw in the theater.
I know.
Yeah.
I thought that we saw that on the first night.
No, we didn't. It was while I was on vacation.
Oh, yeah. I'm so sorry. I've been saying 2.
It's episode 3. But this is the Jedi perspective. So we had seen what Osha and May thought. And honestly, I think there's kind of some moments that we initially might have thought were kind of sweet between
mm-hmm.
some of the characters that now are viewed a whole differently. We'll get there. But I did want to say, for me, I wish that we had some intersection with the present day. I like seeing the events, but I think the gravity of everything and maybe some of the more confusing elements could have been made more clear by actually cutting back to present day Sol talking to May.
Well, I think that's just it. I don't hate the way they did it.
I don't either.
I'm fine with it being a flashback because everything was from Sol's perspective.
Mm-hmm. Sol
was in everything, was he not?
There were a few witch scenes, but there were also a few Jedi scenes that the witches weren't in. So,
but Sol himself, because it was the story from his perspective.
There were some scenes where Sol wasn't in it. For example, when Mother Anastasia was having her conversation with the Coven about how she chose to be a mother. But most of it had Sol in it.
Which makes sense, because this is Sol speaking to May.
And
we have to remember that.
I wish that we got to see Sol speaking to May. And
I can do without that. I mean, it's May in handcuffs.
It's true, but I would have loved to have seen Sol's face as he was saying it. I don't know. I spent 5 minutes last week talking about how much I loved that they gave Sol a second to express some emotion. So I don't know. We did record late last week, so we might have been a little delusional. So anyway, we're picking up with the story. The Jedi are in Brendok, and we find out they're there because there's abundant life on this planet, but that life was decimated 100 years prior by a hyperspace disaster.
Yes.
If you're not familiar with what this is referring to, it's from the events of Light of the Jedi, the first High Republic book. And this is where essentially a ship is broken up in hyperspace, and I'll spare you the details because you should read it if you haven't yet. Very good book. But the ship is broken up in hyperspace, and essentially pieces of it are sent flying all around the galaxy, damaging and decimating planets pretty much at every corner of the galaxy. It's kind of crazy. Really creative and unique for Star Wars. And it was just exciting to see that mentioned here.
Yeah.
Did you, as someone who hasn't read the book, were you like, okay, whatever, it's just like another line? Or could you kind of tell they were like,
I didn't know that it was something that happened in the High Republic book. However, that's one of those things where Star Wars does a really good job, where if you haven't seen everything, you can get by with what happened. And I was able to pick up that there was some sort of accident. There was all kinds of, it looked like ship debris all over this planet. So I could kind of pick up.
It's like in A New Hope, Obi-Wan talks about the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
Clearly that show wasn't out and the prequels weren't out. It could be that for you. So I was just curious to see what you thought about that statement as someone who wasn't as familiar. So they're there trying to figure out why there was so much life on the planet. And we have Torben being kind of whiny about being there. He does not want to be there, and he just wants to go back to Coruscant. And the first thing that I kind of want to move into discussing is Sol telling Torben that there could be a vergence that could be the source of this. You know, vergence being something like the Force Cave on Dagobah. I imagine the big hole that Rey falls into on Ahch-To in The Last Jedi. But the vergence could be the source of this life, and any vergence should be investigated. So the next day, Indara and Sol have an important conversation. They talk about, like, you know, not giving Torben all the answers and letting him figure it out himself. It was like kind of nice Jedi banter. But she says that they're not sure that a vergence is causing this, and that she didn't want him to confuse Torben's feelings with his own. What did you think of this statement, Dan? That maybe Sol is the one who really is feeling frustrated with the assignment.
That's tough. I feel like Sol understands the gravity of it. And when I watched this episode, I thought Torben's just annoyed. Torben's a teenager. He wants to go home. At first, I'm like, oh, he just needs to stop talking. Then it's been like, we've been here for 2 months. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, and like, how much moss can you put in a little cool Jedi container?
And especially with Indara not telling him what's happening, it's like, get some more moss. You'll be okay. And he's like, why? This is the same as it was 2 days ago. This
is another thing that I've seen discussed over, the day since it's been aired. People saying, like, Sol is just being impatient. He wants some, like, big grand plan. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that he is interested in finding a vergence. Maybe he's making it more than it needs to be. But I definitely think there's something to it.
Well, it's just kind of crazy. Like, you're at a place where there's not supposed to be any life, and this planet is thriving. Mm-hmm. I mean, I feel like most people with any sense of curiosity would be like, why?
What is going on? And there has to be some sort of more explanation, because it's clearly been 100 years. They know what a traditional planet under these circumstances would look like.
Yeah.
And this does kind of get to, like, Indara in episode 3 says, like, we didn't think there was any life here. And from the witch perspective, I think we kind of thought that she was lying.
Yeah.
That turns out that's 100% the truth.
Yeah. And I took life to be like people.
Yeah.
Not necessarily
anything. It's interesting. I'm intrigued by that, and I'm happy to hear that we're on the same page with Sol, because I feel like we might not be in a little bit. But we have the Jedi fan out, and Sol is sent to an area that they hadn't been to yet, where the Bunta tree is. And this is where we have him first seeing the twins, which we also experienced in episode 3 from their perspective. Then we see Mother Coral angrily kind of drag the kids away, and Sol's kind of following this, and they get to their fortress, and Sol decides that he's going to climb up it to investigate what's happening. That seemed like quite the steep climb.
It was.
My man did it twice.
And he got down twice.
Yeah? Wonder if they took the elevator down since they were up there. I don't know.
Maybe.
But yeah, no, he climbed that whole thing, which is kind of crazy. But he's kind of moving throughout the fortress, and we see different perspectives of the events from episode 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was interesting to do that. Like, from his perspective, he sees the kids being attacked, more or less, in the lesson that Mother Anastasia was giving. He sees, these witches doing some sort of ritual over what he thinks is a virgins, that, like, hole in the ground. So, for me, I understand why Sol is scared and why he might think these kids are in danger here. We talked about how perspective is important, but from what Sol knows, I feel like this is frightening to him. Do you agree with that?
I feel like you're leading me on.
A little bit.
That'd get objected in court.
That's a loaded question. Very pointed.
It was. Yes, I will concede. I think from all accounts, if I'm Sol, I'm seeing... I will say this. I'm going to kind of pivot here. I'll answer a question with a question. Do you think he formed his attachment to Osha yet? I know when I think he did. I want to know when you think he did.
I don't think he did yet.
I disagree.
What do you think?
I think he did it at the tree.
Watching them interact with the...
And we could see May force...
Yeah. I think that... Actually, I would have said when he calls her out. But I think there may have been that connection prior. I like that insight.
He picked her as the gentle one. The one who's closer with the Force.
Mm-hmm. With nature.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. I like that a lot, actually.
Yeah. So to answer your original question, from Sol's perspective, I think he realized Osha could be in danger. Because May was able to block it.
Do you think he cares about May?
No, I don't think he cares about May.
I might agree with you. Also, remember how we talked about like the little sound that they heard while they were in that training session could be the Jedi sneaking around?
Yeah.
Turns out that's what it was.
Good job.
Was that me or you?
That was all you.
Hey! Crackpot theories turn out to be right sometimes.
Oh, yeah, how's tech doing?
Not great. And remember, at the end of our last episode, I had said my crackpot theory was that Sol will have done nothing wrong. That went about as well as Tech being alive. Anyway, he's doing all this stuff, and he ends up coming back to the Jedi encampment, and he brings us up to Indara, and she kind of resists the idea of doing anything about it, leave them be, and she agrees to go and kind of investigate to see if the girls would be safe.
Mm-hmm.
They get to where the elevator is, and they're kind of like deciding what's going to happen. And Indara wants to go in alone, but Sol insists that everyone goes.
Foolish.
Sol makes a series of mistakes in this episode, and for me, I have this as the first one.
Right.
I think it would have been much better received, not even necessarily because it's a community of all women sending Indara in by herself, but just because it seemed very aggressive almost.
And this is why I'm saying I think Sol already formed his connection to May.
Mm-hmm.
Indara had no dog in the fight. She'd go in and be like, hey, we saw this. We just want to make sure the girls are safe. Ask to pull them aside. You guys safe and leave. And so like, no, we got to go in now. A group. And let's not forget, they have a Wookiee with them.
Mm-hmm.
Most people know what a Wookiee is, right? You would think?
I'd say.
Yeah. I'd be intimidated by this 7-foot hairy thing who could snap me in half with no effort.
It does kind of seem like they're rolling in there, all of that. So
it's like they walked in formation almost.
It was. And again, this is when they all decide to go in. This is when they interrupt the Ascension ceremony.
Before we do that, I have a quick question about the symbolism here.
Fire away.
Indara was in the robe she was in when she was killed.
Was she?
She did not have the gold.
I thought she had the gold on.
I don't think she had
Or did she have it on earlier?
I don't think she had it on at that point.
Continue talking. I'll look it up.
Do you think, if that's truly the case, do we think that means something? Or is it other than just Indara was wearing her true field outfit?
I thought she was in the gold.
Not when she walked in. I didn't think she was.
If that does mean something, maybe she because the gold, like that brownish, is kind of like their field robes. Like everything, the whiter stuff is more like ceremonial. I am in Disney Plus right now, so bear with me.
I know.
Just to confirm.
So I don't know. I noticed it. I'm like, that's weird.
they're 90s. See, she's wearing her.
That's tan.
That's what they're all wearing. They're all wearing the same thing.
Go to the scene where they're walking. They're doing their hot girl walk down the hallway.
That's where Torben is possessed. Excuse us. Let's just say sure.
While you look that up, back to your original point. I think if nobody went with Indara, they would have been better received.
I 100% agree, and I think that it again, like we talked about, a series of bad decisions. This is the start of making bad decisions.
I think this is see, she's not doesn't have it.
What do you mean? That's the same.
Pause it. No, it's not.
It's not what she wore when she was killed, though. So we got here.
She did not have the gold on at all.
That is true. I wonder why she's different. Great question. I don't know. So Dan is correct that she is not matching the rest of them. She is not wearing the outfit she was cut in, though, because that had more of like a strapey situation.
Okay, but she did not have the gold of the High Republic on.
Yeah, so maybe she was really trying to be diplomatic. I don't know.
I don't know. I noticed it, and it stood out to me. And we know symbolism in Star Wars is a big thing.
Everything typically means something.
But we also know that sometimes the curtains are blue because the author's favorite color was blue. We can't read too much into it.
Yeah, who knows? Poor Indara. I still feel bad. But so anyway, we're here. We're at the Ascension ceremony that's interrupted, and where are we?
I'm sorry, I threw you off.
No, it's okay. We get to see an interesting perspective of when Torben is possessed. This isn't quite what I expected from this, and it was interesting that she kind of knew his deepest desires. She knew his deepest desires, and like in order to possess him, she had to like get permission almost. What did you think of the way that this conversation?
I think it shows the way that they approach the Force, the Coven, that is, or at least Mother Anastasia, almost respectfully. Mm-hmm. Like we've seen the Jedi do when they wanted to get into somebody's mind, they'll just go for it. Mm-hmm. We saw that in the Clone Wars, especially. Like I'm thinking of that interrogation scene.
Yeah.
Like, so it was weird that she asked for permission, but she knew how. Maybe you have to con.
To whatever they're doing.
I'm gonna hold my thoughts on that.
All right. For me, I think she does this though. Obviously, it's all in an effort. Like the possession is in an effort to essentially scare the Jedi off the planet. I think.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, though, I think this kind of had the opposite effect. I think it just made Torben scared of her and make them feel like everyone was more in danger,
right? Rather
than they should leave,
right?
Torben kind of causes some problems.
Stop.
We'll get there.
The Ascension scene, I feel like, was the most pivotal scene in the entire show this week. Because we saw a couple things, and I'll let you continue.
I think you might get to what I'm going to say next. The Jedi essentially leave after saying that they'd like to test the twins. And as they get back to the ship, Indara thinks that Sol is like, great idea. You're buying time so we can talk to the council and see what they want us to do. And he's like, no. I want to take Osha as my Padawan. First time he actually puts it into words. And she is like, absolutely not. She is too old that she's in all this mess. She has a family. We're not doing that. Is that kind of the direction you wanted to take this?
Yeah, because they brought Sol. Well, I think his judgment was very cloudy. He brings up valid points. He's like, well, May was marked. Osha wasn't. So she must have said no or something.
What she clearly did not want. She was very skeptical of the Ascension.
Right.
And we're still not 100% sure what exactly the Ascension is.
I don't know if we will.
That is correct.
Maybe.
And
maybe we'll get it next week.
Yeah, we got a lot next week. This brings me, though, to what I had as like maybe Sol's second mistake. Was it a mistake to ask to test the twins? Because he's correct that Osha wants to join them, but he doesn't necessarily know that. Verbally, anyway. Could he sense it? Maybe. Does she seem interested 100%?
I don't think it was a mistake to test the twins, because even like you said, it's a good way to buy time, and it's a good way to get the twins alone to find out, are they really in danger? And Indara very diplomatically says, like, you can't deny us the right to test. And Mother Anastasia is like, you know what? You're right. So I think they use the testing they use Mace testing to their advantage.
Mm-hmm. And we can get there. So Are you ready?
I didn't skip anything, did I?
No. So the Jedi test happened. The twins are delivered to the Jedi, just like we saw previously. And we start with Torben taking their blood samples.
Only one.
Well, that we know of. Well, we only see one, but they clearly took both.
Well, we saw Osha's in episode 3.
Did we see?
We saw everything with Osha in episode 3.
I couldn't remember if we saw her.
Everything we saw with May, we saw with Osha in episode 3.
Okay, and I do want to say we did hear essentially this last week when May was walking around the ship.
Mm-hmm.
Like we could hear her like remembering what happens. I thought that was cool. But so the blood samples are taken from May to start, and May starts taking the test, and she is very obviously failing on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Osha's deception was a little more convinced. They knew that she was lying, but I think she put on a little bit better of a show. So they're basically like, you know what, you failed it, whatever, who cares? And then they started asking her some questions, and they ask about, like, what is the ascension? Like, they start to get May to give some information, and you and I had talked earlier about why might she have told the truth. I think at that point, she had done what she needed to, and she felt comfortable enough around them to speak her piece, kind of. She says about the ascension, though, a quote that I think sounds... It's a misquote of what Mother Anastasia had said, and it sounds far more frightening. And once again, all about perspective, kind of puts the Jedi on the back foot again and continues to fear for their safety. So May says, everyone must walk through fear. Everyone must be sacrificed to fulfill their destiny. Which really does sound terrible, because Mother Anastasia's initial comment was sacrificing part of oneself, likely to, give it to the coven to be leaders, because that's kind of what at least symbolically, the ascension means. What did you think of this misquote and how it might have sent the Jedi into a little bit of a spiral?
You could see it, and Dara's like, okay, there's probably something to this soul. I'll give that to you. And Soul's like, we need to get her. We need to get Osha. I mean, we need to get them both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that brings us to Osha's test, which kind of picks up where we saw it. And we see a different perspective of Soul kind of telling Osha about the Jedi. And from Osha's perspective in episode 3, it sounded so like gentle and sweet, like, come join our big happy family. And from the other side, we have Indara not being happy about that, essentially saying that Soul's coaching her through it. That's why she passed, which I don't necessarily agree with. That's why she passed, but he definitely was coaching her through it.
I think they both knew that she was passing. Mm-hmm. And I think Indara's like, no, that's fine. You want to fail, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. I think Indara this whole episode is trying to, like, hold back, like, a tsunami.
And you could tell she's getting more and more annoyed with everything that happens. Well, we skipped over a part where she made a comment to Soul about, this is why you don't have a Padawan.
Yep, and that was kind of... I mentioned they had...
like, the little Jedi banter, but I think that one may have cut a little deeper.
No, this is why you don't have a Padawan. And what are the odds, though, that he leaves that conversation and then immediately finds his Padawan?
That's my point. I
think
he was looking. I think he wanted one.
That
the council is like, no. Just no. It's like from SpongeBob, where he does the long drawn out no.
Have you did you get to the part in Dooku Jedi Lost where they did the Padawan selection?
Yeah.
So this is very different, and granted, it was probably relatively close, maybe like 20 or 30 years after this. There's this thing where like all the younger Jedi kind of, show their skills and stuff, and then the Jedi
they duel.
There's a duel. There are like series of competitions, right?
They're separated into clans, and then they go through tests, and it ends with a duel. They duel another clan member,
and then the Jedi Master, who will be the Jedi Masters, are kind of watching, and then they get to pick who their Padawan is. Yeah. Thank you for reminding me. It's been a while since I've read it.
Sorry.
So no, don't be sorry. I appreciate it. So this is very different than that, and not to say that every Padawan is selected that way. I mean, think about Anakin and Ahsoka. Is that where you're going?
Yeah.
But,
think about Obi-Wan and Anakin.
Yeah, that very non-traditional. But, that kind of brings us to the twins go back. And Dara basically says, the council said no. She's too old. We're not taking her. Just let it. We've already interfered too much. Just let it be.
We have our issues with the Jedi Council's decision making in the prequels.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very sound decision.
All
the reasons they gave were legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
She's too old. And most importantly, she has a family. We're not separating her from her family. We're not interfering with this.
Almost the same argument that they give with Anakin, which is intriguing. Which I think Sidious still would have been able to pull off his plans without Anakin, but I think Anakin made it a lot easier for him.
Oh yeah.
So who knows what would have happened if they didn't take Anakin? But we hear that Soul seems pretty okay with it. Like, I think Soul, if the events we're about to talk about hadn't happened, I think Soul would have been probably not thrilled, but he probably would have let it go. Do you agree?
I'm not sure. Joe, okay, I don't want to get ahead of myself. Seeing what we've seen in the second half of this episode, I don't know. I cannot say for certain Soul would have let it go.
If they just straight up got back on the ship, well, they weren't getting back on the ship.
No,
you are correct. They were staying there. But speaking of getting off the planet, Torben hears all this and decides, you know what my ticket back to Coruscant is? He has the results of their M counts, which is what
super interesting, by the way.
Very, very much so. And this connects to me, George Lucas talking about his sequel trilogy, which honestly, there's a lot of similarities. And George Lucas, he changes what he says, like the weather. But one of his things was for the Force to get more microbiotic is the term that he uses. Mm-hmm. And this kind of it scratches the surface there. So the twins have a high M count, which is expected. We might expect based on the way that this is all kind of mirroring Anakin a little bit. And he says, though, their symbionts are an exact match. And this concept is relative. Like, I think it's pretty much untouched. Mm-hmm. But the idea there is that every individual should be unique. And the fact that they're essentially like, markers, mm-hmm. like kind of like a genetic marker almost or something, it's like identical, kind of brings them to the conclusion that they might have been a single person split into two, potentially.
Because Indara says they're identical twins. That's expected. And Torben says, no. They're exact. Mm-hmm. And then he says, this can only happen if it's coming from one person whose consciousness could... And then he starts going on a Dan Crackpot theory, split into two.
Yep. I mean, this does kind of get to their little saying, always one, but born as two.
Yeah.
I do think, though, that this is not a real answer. There's not a real answer given later in the episode. This kind of brings us to, like, what do you think actually happened with them? Do you think we're going to find out? Is it important? All of those questions kind of wrapped up in one.
Oh, I don't know. I think the biggest question that if they could only answer one that I want to get, how? I just want to know how they were created.
I agree. And Mother, this is something that kind of, again, if you've listened to us at all, I don't tend to have major complaints. But one of my complaints is Mother Coral says, and what would the Jedi do if they found out how they were created? Like, it kind of set up this, like, confrontation.
There's something nefarious. I don't want to say nefarious. Something that probably shouldn't have happened on, like, the little gray area of mm-hmm. ethics of how they were created. And they're like, here it is. And we're like Charlie Brown. Disney is Lucy holding the football.
Disney?
Yeah. Have you not seen Charlie Brown?
Yeah, but what are you talking about, Disney?
Star Wars.
You mean like Lucasfilm?
Yeah.
Leslie Headland. Let's say Leslie Headland.
Leslie Headland is Lucy holding the ball.
Yes.
We, as the fans, run up to kick the ball to get the answer, and Leslie yanks the ball away.
Yes, and while I do like this episode, I think some of the aspects of it, and we'll talk about this kind of at the end, kind of fell a little flat for me, and that I feel like they were kind of teasing this being a central part maybe of what happened. Mm-hmm. And this is essentially the closest we get to a speculation or answer. So, taking that together, anything else to add about the creation?
No.
I agree the how is probably the most important part. And I think that's something that does actually have a chance of being addressed.
And I feel like if we get the how, we'll get the answer to a couple of the other questions.
Mm-hmm. Or at least
the how
easy
could
to
lead
infer.
To the why.
Yes, 100%. So, hearing all this, Torben decides that it would be a great idea to go get May and Osha and can bring them back to Coruscant as proof of aversion. It's why there's life. Mm-hmm. So my man gets on a speeder and he immediately goes. And Dara sends Soul.
I was going to say, I think this is Indara's mistake.
Yes,
the episode.
100%.
Should not have sent Soul.
No, she should have sent Kalnaka.
Or she should have gone herself.
One of the two. Because I don't think the events would have happened.
No.
I think there may have still been more. The OSHA thing probably wouldn't have been dropped, but I think this travesty could have been avoided.
But also, it seems like Soul is a well-respected Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
By all accounts. He's pretty well known, just from what we've seen.
And who knows at this point how he was. But
right.
And in the present day, he definitely is. But 16 years prior, I don't know.
I mean, it would make sense to send Soul.
Yes. Because he should be the one that can maybe talk some sense into him. But... Soul goes, and as this is happening, we get this interesting Mother Anastasia and Mother Coral parallel. We talked about in episode 3 how much I love Mother Anastasia and how I think she's a wonderful character, and how I do not care for Mother Coral. Much like the duality of like the dark side and the light side, maybe May and Osha, I think these two and their conflicting viewpoints contribute to what happened.
Oh, 100%.
Mother Anastasia gives this wonderful speech to the Coven about how, even though the twins were made to lead the Coven, she wants to honor Osha's choice about being a Jedi, and she's choosing to be a mother over the Coven's leader.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think of that?
That was sweet.
Me too. I think mother-daughter relationships aren't often touched on in Star Wars, so that it was nice to actually see this. I think I'm going to talk about this before.
Yeah.
You would look like you had a light bulb idea. Later? All right. That brings us to... I wrote in our notes, Mother Anastasia is great. She is great. I love her.
The only sketchy thing she did was possess Torben.
Yeah, and like I said, I think she may have been trying to do that as a tactic to avoid having to do worse.
Yeah.
And there's another sketchy thing she did that might be the last thing she did that we'll talk about.
That's kind of what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
But we're going to get there, all in due time.
We will. Very soon, actually. But Mother Coral they kind of leave. May gets real mad, and Mother Coral kind of like gets her all riled up, taps her into rage, and says, "Why don't you stop Osha from leaving?" Mm-hmm. And then she prepares the witches for battle.
Yeah,
which I don't. This duality, I think. Again, the Jedi aren't innocent in this situation, but neither are the witches. They are, especially Mother Coral's. I think Mother Coral set everything up for it to be a conflict.
And this is where I'm going to disagree with you.
It's amazing that our first disagreement happened this far into the episode.
I think Mother Coral is... I don't agree with her riling up May. Mm-hmm. It does make sense for her, though, to try and protect the Coven.
To their knowledge, though, were the Jedi coming to kill them or fight them?
I don't know. Well, think of it this way. Remember, May and Osha are her kids too. Mm-hmm. She carried them. She made that note. She said it twice.
She did say it twice.
How would you feel if somebody was coming to come take them away? Somebody who you know is supposed to lead you and be the future of your group. Somebody's coming to take them away.
It's a great question, but I think Mother Anastasia shows us what I'm going to do in air quotes here, right answer is.
I'm not saying she's right or wrong, but I'm saying I understand... just from the human aspect of it, wanting to protect your children.
Yes.
And protect yourself. Because, as we see, she probably wasn't wrong to try and have some form of defense.
And I want to put a pin in this because we're going to come back to something as we tend to do, we get a little excited, get a touch ahead of ourselves, because I want to address...
I was hesitant to say it, but I felt
no, it's okay.
I disagreed with you.
That's okay. I still try to make Soul as good as I can. But I want to answer your comments there with a question that I have written later. So we see May start a fire, very similar to what we saw at first from episode 3. But then you immediately see her regret it. Like you said, she's just trying to burn the book. Mm-hmm. Maybe, and not start an enormous fire. So there is truth to May starting the fire.
She also did one more thing.
Go ahead.
She locked them in.
She locked
the gates so nobody could get in or
yeah,
out.
Yeah.
So even if the events didn't transpire the way they did,
mm-hmm.
was anybody making it out that night?
Probably not.
If that fire really did spread.
Yeah, no, you're right. I didn't even think about that.
They couldn't go anywhere. They would have been locked in the courtyard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They could have jumped over the wall, but
That was a very high wall, as we've already said.
So
That's really
I just
insightful.
wanted
I missed that.
I just wanted to throw that out there.
She said nobody in or out.
Right.
Interesting. Right? I like that. So, anyway, are you good with May? Anything else you want to say?
No, I thought it was, like you said, you could see May's instant regret trying to kick the fire out, and immediately ran to get Mother Anastasia.
Mm-hmm.
Which we didn't see that in episode 3, did we?
No. We just saw her start the fire and kind of get that crazy look in her eye and then throw it down. And then I think it like just stayed on the fire.
Yeah.
As this is happening, we cut to Sol, who is, running after Torben. He finds him, but rather than stopping him like he was intending to do, he decides to join him. This, for me, we talked about the Sol mistakes. This is arguably this isn't the most impactful, but this is probably the biggest Sol mistake. This is like the point of no return, deciding that he's going to go try and get the kids.
He could sense something, right?
He sensed something, like that they couldn't
scream or...
Yeah, like, I think that's highlighting their connection. And last episode, Chimere kind of talked about, like, it's Osha's power, and Sol's sensing her. It's not Sol's power.
Right.
And I think this kind of gets at that. I don't think we quite know what it is yet.
Yeah.
But I think Sol's sensing that she's in distress. And it makes sense that he would want to go save her. But also, it does kind of set him up in a position.
Osha, I have to save you. The room you're in could potentially have black mold 25 years from now.
I think you're exaggerating just a hair.
Am I?
Just a hair. He wasn't that obsessed. He was pretty obsessed, though. So anyway, I understand why he decided to do this, but and a good call out pointing out the connection. I kind of forgot about that part. But after they enter the compound, Torben and Sol, there's this discussion between like a bunch of the witches are around. Mother Anastasia and Mother Coral are there, and there's this discussion. And the thing I really want to point out of this quote, Sol's essentially asking them how the twins were created, and Mother Anastasia throws out a quote that says, "Those noble intentions will destroy every Jedi in the galaxy." Yeesh. Was she right or was she right?
Somebody has some foresight.
I know. And I think it's this for me, I don't know about you, but for me this is like the Jedi want to help. They want to be the defenders of the Republic. And I think this trapped them into being the generals, which led to, all the Order 66 stuff. I just love seeing all of this kind of these ripples from these events.
Butterfly effect.
I think it's so like this line could mean nothing if you're not a Star Wars. Like I would totally think someone who's not a Star Wars fan could watch this and the show and be totally fine. But like it's so rich to see someone that has that foresight to be able to think someone could take advantage of this very clearly if they chose to.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Sweet.
But so May runs out looking for help, much like you just said, and Sol calls her Osha. I have some questions about this. I think it's interesting. Like, we had seen when they did the twin swap between the last two episodes, he didn't immediately know that it was May. And you would kind of think, like we talked about, Yoda says that every individual has a unique identity in the Force in the first episode of the Clone Wars. Do you think that there's something kind of about their creation?
Going back to what Torben said.
I think we're on the same wavelength.
If they really are one consciousness split into two, that's probably what you can sense.
And if you remember at the end when May switched places at the end of episode 6, I was like, Sol should know. Sol should know they're unique, but maybe they're not. Oh, given that, do you think that Sol does want to protect both twins in this case? Like, even if it was Osha running out there saying May's in trouble, what do you think Sol would have done?
Nothing.
I think you're giving Sol a hard time.
Am I?
I think Sol, his priority is Osha, 100%. I will not fight you on that. I think Sol would happily take May if it meant he would get Osha.
I don't think he would. I don't think he cares about May. I don't think he cared about May from the beginning. I
have a retort, but we'll get there.
Ahead.
Why don't we continue?
Okay.
I'm talking about the bridge scene. We'll talk about it. Anyway, so this is happening. May runs out. And, I think it's interesting here that the events that are about to transpire, I think it's weird that the witches, they're going to let Osha go with the Jedi. That Mother Anastasia has said it, and she'll say it again in this episode. isn't it weird that they were kind of so standoffish and like they didn't quite communicate what was going on? Why Mother Anastasia, I won't just get to it, she turns into a giant black smoke monster. Do you think that what's the disconnect between these two groups? Is it that the Jedi invaded again?
I just think they don't trust the Jedi.
And I don't know that they should necessarily.
The Jedi pride themselves on being this noble group. I mean, they even say you have noble intentions. Mm-hmm. They just go out about everything in such a non-noble way. They break in consistently.
And I think this is all getting to souls. Let the attachment driving you to do different things is really what causes a lot of this to happen.
Right.
And that's the lesson.
You and I kind of talked, and you said, this is Torben's fault. And as a Soul Patrol member, I understand where you're coming from. However, this is Soul's fault. This is all the events that lead up to this point of Mother Anastasia going to the black sand smoke cloud is Soul's fault. Torben was the catalyst that got them there.
Agree.
But this is on Soul.
Because of how obsessed he is.
Yes.
Osha.
His attachment. And as we've...
Ding, 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 ding. That's the key word. Anything else said about that before? I'm sure we'll get to this again. Mother Anastasia, like I said, turns into a black smoke. I said it's like the monster from Lost recently on Netflix. You should watch it. It's not a spoiler. It's a thing.
Is it in episode 1?
Probably not.
Spoiler.
There's way more to it than knowing that there's a black monster in Lost. Anyway, Mother Anastasia turns into that, and it seems like she's doing something to help Osha. I'm still a little confused. Like real Osha, not May. It seemed like maybe to me she was like going to transport to go actually help Osha was my impression.
But why did May get...
That was my next comment, is that May kind of goes with them in the smoke. Mm-hmm. I wonder if Mother Anastasia is like trying to pull her to get her away from the Jedi. Mm-hmm. But what happens here as this is happening, like I said, Mother Anastasia is turning into black smoke. May is turning into black smoke. And I think when Soul sees that, he starts to freak out. Because again, precious Osha, the Osha privilege, Soul, turns on his lightsaber and stabs Mother Anastasia.
I was half expecting it to go through her.
Me too. I didn't think it was actually going to do something, and then it's like he got her right in the chest, because she was still dissipating as that was happening. I have conflicted feelings of what happened here. He obviously gave in to fear, but it was in defense of Osha. And I think this is an example of a flawed but not evil Jedi.
I don't think he's evil, but I think he's ignorant.
Elaborate.
We're scared of what we don't know. Like, I don't think the natural reaction to that is, I'm going to go stab this person. What do they say? Jedi don't attack unarmed people?
That's kind of the thing, isn't it? I mean, in his defense, she was doing something that seemed kind of voodoo-y.
I hope you're not my lawyer.
I don't think that Soul was in the right for stabbing Mother Anastasia. But if you're trying to put yourself in his mind, if you're in that situation...
But that's it. We can't look at it from Soul's mind, because Soul's mind is flawed at this point.
Even
all of his judgments are clouded.
Let's say Endara was standing there, not Soul, and that happened. Maybe she wouldn't stab, but she definitely would be put on the back foot.
I don't think she would. Her first instinct would be kill.
Stab.
Death.
I agree. I think that's all part of the attachment. And again, it's very hard for me as a very big Soul fan over the last few weeks.
You can be, again, my favorite character is Count Dooku. You can be a fan of whatever character you like.
It's true.
You just have to admit their faults.
Yeah, this is bad. This is bad call, Soul. So this happens, and I think for me, this gets at why Soul is always so reluctant to use a lightsaber. I think in that moment, he knows that this was a mistake. He doesn't use a lightsaber in the subsequent fight against Mother Coral. All in the rest of the show, he's first to do hand-to-hand combat. The first time we see his lightsaber is defending Osha from the Umbra Moth, and then against Chimere. So I think this is kind of, you're getting this retrospective view of what's happening in the show, and is recontextualized. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I, in my mind, was like, this is what the Jedi do. They should defend. They shouldn't be quick to draw their weapon. Turns out it's because he had to learn that the hard way.
Yeah.
He had to make someone else learn that the hard way, I guess.
And then I don't like this next little line that Mother Anastasia says.
She says, again, Saul has stabbed Smoke Monster, Mother Anastasia.
And she goes back to...
normal Mother Anastasia.
Yeah.
Do you want to say it? Do you want me to say it?
You can say it.
She says, essentially, and, ends with, I was going to let you take her. And he was probably playing that in his mind every second of every day.
But also, lead with that.
Yeah, no, and this is what I was trying to say when I was talking about miscommunication. I think my soul bias came out a little bit, and we didn't get to actually talk about it, but 100% miscommunication amongst these two groups.
It just goes back to it then. We're going to stab people due to miscommunications.
It's true. Again, I don't want to ignore how terrifying that must be, the giant black cloud monster. But stabbing should...
Torben draw his lightsaber.
Torben's just thinking... He's probably daydreaming about Dex's Diner. On Coruscant. I wasn't sure if you like that or not. Normally, Dan makes the jokes that make me sit there and frown at him.
It's just mansplain Dex's Diner.
I didn't know if you found it funny.
I didn't think it was a
joke. He is in the High Republic books.
Yeah.
I don't know if his diner is open at this point.
No Camino saber darts on the menu.
Saber dart. Anyway, so this, this happens, and Mother Coral immediately starts fighting Saul. Again, like I said, he's already not using his lightsaber. I think it's so sad that he had to come to it in that way. But we also see some cool Torben lightsaber moves, deflecting these arrows from the witch.
I didn't expect that.
No, I thought that he would, as a Padawan, we've seen varying levels of Padawan competence. He would look like Anakin over there, twirling his lightsaber.
He's the second most competent Padawan we've seen.
Yeah? Who would you say the first is?
In the show, Jackie.
Yeah, Jackie was
Jackie
good.
went toe-to-toe with Chimere for a long time.
A long time.
And the only reason she lost is because Chimere did a dirty trick.
Yeah, he did. And she beat May, too.
Yeah, well.
Miss Jackie. Oh. At least they didn't cut to her dead body in this episode. But anyway, we see the cool Torben lightsaber moves. And, I think Soul even cuts... He does use his lightsaber to cut her weapon.
Yeah.
Again, this is the mind... It's a shame that Mother Anastasia, a great character, a character who I think is most aligned with the ideals of the Jedi in this coven.
What if that's symbolic?
I think
for Soul killing the ideals of the Jedi.
I think he wouldn't be killing. I think he would be rejecting them. And I think in the next episode, and we've already started to see him kind of work back to it. Mm-hmm. Again, if Darth Vader is able to be redeemed after all the stuff he did,
yeah,
I think Soul can be forgiven. Fictionally, of course. This is not real world. Like we don't have a lawyer standing here. Anyway, I'm sure
Judge Judy would say Soul deserves a chair.
Good thing Judge Judy. The closest thing we have to Judge Judy in Star Wars is Cyril Karn's mother. Yeah, it's an Andor reference. Yeah, I don't love Andor, and I still made it. Anyway, so this fight happens, and I think Mother Coral's like, this isn't working out. So she turns into the smoke monster, and all the witches kind of work together to possess Kelnaka, who at this point hadn't even been seen yet.
Right, because Soul said Torben, Soul said to Mother Coral, you can't get to him. He strengthened his mind.
Yeah.
And she's like, it's not him.
And at this point, Indara and Kelnaka were flying the ship because no one could get in or out.
Yeah.
And no. It was very creepy, the stance they had him in. Thought it was really cool. And then we get to see a really awesome fight with, Wookiee Jedi. Seeing a Wookiee Jedi is exactly what you would have wanted to see fighting.
Yeah.
I did learn something. I was watching Star Wars Explains coverage of this, and he brought up the concept of, and I'm not sure quite where it comes from, but the concept of a mad claw. And Wookiees technically are forbidden from using their claws to attack. Mm-hmm. And so Kelnaka doing that to Torben must be another one of the reasons that he's so ashamed of everything and is off on his little solitary pilgrimage. Mm-hmm. Anything else about the fight? I just thought it was so cool. What did you think about it?
Sweet. Torben held his own too.
I know. I think I just had this impression that Torben wasn't going to...
Torben looked like a weasel.
A little bit.
I'll say it.
There's something. I can't figure it out. So if you look up a picture of Torben, or the actor that plays Torben, I'm so sorry I'm forgetting his name. He looks more like young Torben. The beard and or the receding hairline hair had to have been something looked wrong with adult Torben.
Well, we had young Torben play him. They just threw him in makeup.
Yeah, I don't know. It seemed like they should have taken the older actor and aged him down rather than aging the younger actor up. I don't know.
No, I think
this actor did a wonderful job.
I think
Torben.
they should have had the younger Torben. More important.
Yeah, maybe 10 years. Really, 16 years though is quite a while between.
I mean, we've seen what happened to Obi-Wan between Kenobi and A New Hope.
Not great. But so there's this fight, and we talked about Kanaka and the Mad Claw, and we then have Indara kind of come in, and she does this cool like Matrix style move, like Trinity, and she takes Kanaka down and is able to release the control that the witches have on his mind. This is like my biggest question of this episode. We see her do this, and all the witches that are, kind of like vibrating or like vibing back and forth, possessing Kanaka, we see them just fall into the positions we see in episode 3.
Yes, and I think we should mention that they were all working together to possess Kanaka.
Yes.
Whereas Mother Anastasia could possess Torben by herself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's either a testament for how strong Mother Anastasia is, or how many witches they needed to possess a Wookiee.
Mm-hmm. I think maybe both, potentially. Yeah. Do you think that it was like the severing, like they clearly are like putting all their, maybe if we're going to use their terms, putting all their threads together to possess Kanaka, maybe like when Indara severed that thread, that's what killed them?
Severed their life form, I think so.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know that we're ever going to get an answer to this.
Well, we can't ask Indara, can we?
No. I definitely think that they're dead. I saw some people saying they're like...
Oh, they're dead.
Did you ever see the Pete Holmes Batman sketch where he like shoots people with a gun and he's like, they're sleeping? That's what people saying that they're just like passed out reminds me of. I think that they're donezo.
I mean, they're sleeping, just
permanently.
Not going to wake up.
So yeah, that happens. And I do want to say here, again, I apologize to Indara at the beginning. She was fantastic in this episode, and it makes me sad we didn't get more.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I wish that all 4 of these Jedi, we got a lot of soul, which I loved. I wish we got to see more of the other 3 in some capacity. Like maybe like if all the episodes on Kofar, like they weren't traveling to get to Kalnaka, or if they switched it and made it Indara or something. Mm-hmm. Like it would have been cool if that Jedi was actually with them for part of it.
Yeah,
I don't know. I like them a lot. It's a testament to the strength of the characters that they created.
Yeah.
Makes me want to spend more time with them. Prequel? I don't know. I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I think the point of these characters is the tragedy. Yeah. So that all is going on. We see Indara being really awesome. And Mother Coral, we don't see her again. Where is she, Dan?
I don't know.
Is she trapped in Kalnaka's mind? Is that why he's drawing all those symbols?
Could make sense. Or did she die with him?
Is she released when he was killed? Or did she die when he died? Is she even in there? I don't know. I think it's cool. I feel like we've not seen the last of her. Because I feel like someone needs to give some answers before the show season, depending on...
We're going to Twilight Zone it. She's... Coral's going to come out. Everything's paused. I bet you're wondering. Do like the old Rod Sterling walking in a suit.
Uh-huh. And Kiadi Mundi did not break Kanan. That's the end of her spiel. But yeah, no, I don't think we've seen the last of her. I'm not going to lie to you. And we don't have much left to see. But that's that. And, after this fighting is all done and Dara resolves it, Sol goes looking for the twins and sees them both standing on this like broken bridge that's collapsing, and they're on either side, like we saw in episode 3. You said he very clearly does not care about May. He holds both of them up with the Force, and it's too much for him. Bless you. Too much for him, and he's not able to, hold them both up long enough to rescue them. He wasn't even able to hold the one he chose up long enough to rescue her without like just barely missing her.
Why didn't he hold the kids instead of the bridge?
We put a tweet out, and there was a comment that said that thing. Why didn't he hold the kids, not the bridge? Great question. I don't know.
I think it also is just a flaw of Soul.
It could be like that was his, like, you know, when you're
he
like...
just reacted. He's like, oh, the bridge is falling. I got to save the bridge.
I mean, Dan and I work in a lab. Imagine if, like, something happened in the lab, a bottle broke or something. You might not have the most sound, like, things are happening. Not to equate a bottle breaking in the lab to this whole coven dying.
To Soul, it was the same.
You know what I... Well, yeah. You know what I mean, though? Like, you're not necessarily going to make the most sound decision.
Yeah.
But he does save Osha and just straight up lets May fall. I thought that was nuts. We've seen Kanan and Ezra like throw each other around with the Force. Like, it would be very cool to see. He could have. I don't know.
Could you imagine if May somehow is trying to save Osha, hold Osha up too?
Yeah, that would have the thread.
Well, because we know May is stronger than she is.
Yeah. Or at least more willing and practiced at tapping into it. Yeah, I don't. I thought this was crazy, and I think this act. Soul made a lot of mistakes. We talked about it the whole way through.
This is straight up killing.
This is
cold blooded.
This is not defense. He's probably so relieved when he found out she was alive,
or he's upset.
Maybe both.
He's like, oh, I had my demons, but they weren't going to come back and try and kill me.
What did Khemir say to him?
I've accepted
my darkness. What have you done with yours? Clearly buried it. Anything else to add about the choosing of the twins?
No, but I have something to add directly after this.
Okay. Before we do that, I wanted to say, poor May. All she did was start a fire that didn't harm hardly anyone.
It would have killed everybody anyway.
It probably would have, but they pinned the murder on her, which we're going to talk about, and they literally, to their knowledge, murdered her.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so after Soul rescues May, in episode 3, we see her walking May through the coven and outside. Osha, excuse me. Where Osha sees Mother Anastaea's body. Mm-hmm. And Soul yanks her away and says, no. She's already gone. Can you imagine how she would have reacted if she saw the lightsaber hole in her?
Yeah, not well. Not well at all.
That's why he kept her away.
Yeah.
That was my light bulb moment.
No, yeah, that would have been disastrous for him. She wouldn't have went. Not that there's anyone left.
No.
Jeez. This is grim.
It is grim. Like that's why he didn't let her do it.
No, it makes total sense. I feel like this episode is when we were talking about the show at the beginning, we called it a fusion of Andor and Ahsoka. And I think we're leaning more. There are lightsabers. There's so many lightsabers. It's honestly less wild, more serious tone. I really am enjoying.
This is what I like. It's great.
It's really good. The fact that there's lightsabers gets me
into
it too.
Grittiness of it.
Gritty. Anyway, you just want to talk about the Flyers.
We just liberated our Russian prospect.
I don't know what that means, and I'm going to just continue.
It means he's coming over from Russia. He got out of his KHL contract.
Good for him.
It is good for him. It's good for us.
Anyway, they get back to the Jedi ship, and Endara essentially decides that they're going to lie to the Jedi Council and tell them the story that May started a fire that killed everyone. We see Soul, as we saw in episode 3, say that to Osha, and that's where it ends. I think I'm struggling with my words here because I don't know what they obviously should have told the council the truth. In that moment, though, do you think they made the safest decision for them or the right decision? What do you think about that?
Endara said it best. You cannot tell Osha what happened.
Mm-hmm.
You are responsible for killing everybody she ever knew directly. And now you're going to go say, just kidding. I'm going to go to jail for it.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's all for Osha, which clearly Soul, at this point has got to be like, oh, gosh.
It's like, you know what? I think I liked May better.
And, I'm intrigued to see I wonder if we'll see more about what happened between this and Osha leaving the Order, because everything they've said is Endara suggested that Osha's training be suspended. Mm-hmm. Like, what might have happened there? Intriguing, considering that Endara is the one here that's like, you ruined this girl's life. We have to take her in.
Also, it makes a lot more sense now why May is chained down.
Yeah. I wouldn't have wanted...
I don't know how I would react in that situation.
And she's clearly proven that she can handle a Jedi in a fight, Endara. And even she got beaten down by Soul, but he had some help from Yord.
She convinced Torben to kill himself.
She did convince Torben to kill himself. Torben clearly had some demons. I think each Jedi here feels responsible, but they're handling it in very different ways.
Except Soul.
Soul's suppressing. He clearly is feeling it.
He's saying something happened. Torben's like, I'm just going to go in a box. Kilnaka's all off on his own. Indara's like...
Scribbling witch drawings?
Maybe, yeah.
Indara might take the cake as best true-to-form Jedi in the show.
Yeah, I mean, she went out on top.
Now I need to buy the Indara Black Series figure. Here I was wanting Soul the whole time. Who am I kidding? I'll get them both.
You can get all 4 of them.
They don't have Torben or Kilnaka yet, but they got Yord and Jeki. Relive your saddest moments.
Are they film accurate?
They are not. They're accurate to the first 2 episodes.
They can make Yord film accurate. Not that hard. It's just a twist to the side. Okay. Anyway,
I have 2 things I want to talk about episode wise before I get into a few other little things. First is, what do you we'll do the more like structural thing. What did you think of the song? Like,
different. Wasn't
very different. Did you know that the song was a thing?
No.
I knew the song was a thing. I had heard it. I just totally after such a like serious episode, did not expect to hear like a human singing, because that's never the case in Star Wars. But the song, in case you're wondering, is called "The Power of Two" by Victoria Monet, and I was liking it. I was okay with it, but I was just caught me totally by surprise. I think it's showing that a lot of stuff in the show is showing they're not afraid to do things differently. And I did like that. The last thing I want to talk about, again, story-wise, is for the rest of the show, what might happen if this... It seems like the Jedi Council might find out about this.
About what?
This situation, potentially. The Brendok.
Brendok, okay.
Not necessarily Sith. Obviously, they can't find out about Sith. But do you think that this... do they hide it from the rest of the galaxy? Do they be honest about it and then have them come under more scrutiny from the Senate, which leads to, ripples out to the prequels, the Senate having more direct interaction with the Jedi? I don't know.
I don't know.
I just think it's interesting.
We have 43 minutes to figure this all out.
This is a great transition, Daniel, because one of my things I wanted to talk about is my frustration with the structure of this show and most of the Disney Plus Star Wars shows.
Go ahead.
Even Marvel shows as well. This show is on the caliber of something like, a higher caliber. This isn't like just a goofy little show. And I think it should be given the run times of a normal show. Streaming has us in this weird place where it's like, is this a movie? Is this a really, really long movie? Or is it a TV show? And I think this show has done a good job at being one cohesive story. But we've ended up in a situation where, like, episode 5 and 6 were one episode.
Yeah.
Episode 3 and 7 are essentially one episode. There was a lot of overlap. And I think they needed to do that to recontextualize everything.
Well, it makes sense. There was only one-word titles.
Yeah, it's true. And they're one, which is a great thing. But I feel like this show has set up so many things and done such a great job at it that, and I say this every time there's a Star Wars show, how are they going to end this? We've got a lot to do.
What do we? I'll ask try to answer your question with another question. So the storylines we have right now are the big questions. Does the council find out about Brendok?
Yeah.
Where is Soul going with May?
I believe to find... We talked about this last week, and I think I was wrong, and you were correct. I think he's going to find Osha.
What did I say?
You said that. He's going to find Osha. That's back when you were delusional.
Maybe not that delusional. Not as delusional as the person who's been saying, Soul this, Soul that. Soul's not a mass murderer for 7
Soul
weeks.
didn't mass murder anyone. Did his actions lead to the mass murder of people? Absolutely.
Anyway.
Soul Patrol!
Didn't think he'd be on the Killer fan club.
That's okay. Soul is a visionary.
It's okay. He's not. His judgment was clouded.
Anyway, we have our storylines. We have what happened on Brendok.
Yep.
We have
Osha,
Chimere, and Sol and May likely heading there.
And we forget, the last time we saw Osha, she was putting on Chimere's helmet.
Yes. And then we also have Vernestra, the Jedi.
So we have 4.
More or less.
So I'll ask you a couple questions.
Okay.
Are you sticking with going to find Osha?
That's what I think.
Do we think they find each other, or do we think they meet somewhere?
I think Osha's probably staying wherever they are. I think that's important. I think wherever they are is important for some reason. Would be kind of cool if it was Brendok. I don't think it is.
I don't think it's Brendok.
Leslie Headland has said it's not Octo. We talked about this a little. There's the Sith planet from Legends, Dabalnik or something like that. It's a Cortosis planet. It could be that, but I think they're going to wherever that is.
And then one more question. I'm so glad you brought up the Sith.
Mm-hmm.
Will we see another Sith? And if we do, is it if we do hypothetically get a second Sith, is it a character we've already seen on screen, or is it somebody we haven't seen on screen? For example,
is it Vernestra? No, I don't think the Sith Lord is Vernestra.
I wasn't saying Vernestra.
I know. I'm just messing with you. I think I know where you're going with this. Go ahead.
Is it Osha?
I think we see a second Sith. Last week I kind of was. I'm doing some flip flopping. Last week I thought Osha was like the duality was going to be Osha switching. Mm-hmm. I don't think Osha's going to switch. Everything Osha's done in the show has been, honestly, she's been acting like a Jedi more than the Jedi in the show. Very Ahsoka-ish. She stops Sol from killing Chimere. I think we're going to see Chimere's boss.
Who do we think Chimere's boss is?
Darth something. I don't know.
Heavy hitter answer that.
I mean, what do you want to say, Darth Tenebris?
That's who everybody's thinking it's going to be?
I don't need it to be someone who we know. I honestly, we've talked about my opinions on Legends often. I don't need the Palpatine's lineage to connect to what it is in Legends, but if they choose to do that, that's great. Mm-hmm. Tenebris, is a Bith.
Yeah.
It would be intriguing.
I wonder if his theme music is played by the Cantina Band.
Depends on how long they were around.
Do you imagine?
That would be not intimidating.
Don't have to be intimidating at that point.
As a Bith Sith. Anyway, I think we have a lot to do. I have every faith that we're going to have a satisfying conclusion to this show, but I could already see how some stuff may be left for a potential season 2.
Yeah.
I don't think every question that we have needs to be answered.
So what if you could pick 2 questions to answer?
Okay.
What are they?
Could I say story beats I'd like to see resolved?
Get
other than
2
questions?
of them, though.
Okay, 2. My first one is Sol, May, and Osha coming to terms with everything that happened on Brendok.
Okay.
That, I feel like, is something that must happen to reasonably conclude the show. And I think the second thing for me is they encountered a Sith. They've got to do something with that. They can't leave that dangling. I hope it's a cool lightsaber fight with Vernestra's light whip and Chimere. How that happens, I'm not quite sure. But you don't show the light whip to kill a bug. You got to use the light whip for something else, right?
No, you show the light whip to show that it was used on Chimere.
So, do you think they interact in season 2, or do you think that
I'll raise you.
Is Chimere making it out of season 1?
I could, if Sol and Chimere both don't make it out of season 1, I could see this. Crackpot Theory Wednesday. Sol and Chimere fight.
Yes.
Chimere wins and kills Sol. Mm-hmm. Sith number 1 comes over, kills Chimere because he was disappointed.
I don't know if I love that, but what I would love to see, I'm sneaking in, that is kind of crackpot theory. I don't know how the big Sith might be introduced, if they are, but...
Leslie Headland said there is a second Sith.
It was leaked. But yes, there's going to be a second Sith. I don't know. But for me, I think we got to see the power of 2. We've been hearing about the power of 2, about left, right, and center. Haven't seen it.
But that's just it. Are we going to use it? Will the power of 2 kill Chimere?
Maybe.
Will the power of 2 kill Sol?
No, I think we're going to end with the twins being the good guys.
I could see May being like, I'm still going to kill you. You've earned it.
Maybe. But I think at the end of the day, Osha and May are going to be aligned against the Sith. How about that?
They're going to be aligned with each other.
Against the Sith, I think.
I don't they're going to be aligned with each other.
I don't
for
think
what
Chimera
that
is going to let either of them get away.
I don't think Chimera's going to be around to have much of an opinion much longer.
We'll let that one be.
Fair enough.
Anything else to add about this? I want to say one more thing.
No, go ahead.
This is about not the looking forward, but looking backward. I think we've already talked about it, but the lessons, we haven't done a big ideas thing on the Acolyte. This one I feel most motivated by is like the concept of miscommunication and like perspective. And I think you can understand whether the actions are right or not, where each side is coming from. And I think the disconnect between those two things led to the events of the show.
I mean, in Anakin's soliloquy, well, it really wasn't a soliloquy at the time. In his little speech to Obi-Wan, Obi-Wan says, Anakin, the Sith are evil. And Anakin says, well, from my perspective, the Jedi are evil. And just that. And people are like, oh, that's terrible writing. No, it's the same thing, same ideas. People have different perspectives, and any perspective can frame any argument or any group as the good or the bad guy.
Mm-hmm. And what I think is most frustrating about this story is I do think that these witches and the Jedi have a very similar outlook on the Force.
Yeah. Like you said, miscommunication.
Mm-hmm.
They both... The witches were skeptical of the Jedi, rightfully so. Might I add.
Soul's attachment led to all of this happening.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Love them, but still.
And if, let's say, somebody else comes to that planet, goes to Brendok and sees 30 dead witches, and one of them has a lightsaber, guess who killed them? Mm-hmm. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
Lightsaber hole, excuse me.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I think that for me is like the takeaway, and who knows how many real world incidents have similar, setups. Anything else to add for this week?
No, sir.
I really like this episode. I really like this show. I would love to see a different format, longer runtime. I don't think a story needs longer runtime to be strong, but I think the show is very ambitious in what it's doing, and I think it could have gotten more room to breathe and to flesh stuff out if it was longer.
I agree.
Andor was longer.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect this isn't Lucasfilm. This isn't.
I think this is less than Headland.
I don't think that's true because the writers have said that they were told that they need to have this many episodes and that they needed to split 5 and 6. Like one of the writers went on Twitter and said that. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name. Mm-hmm. But I think this is. I don't know who's telling them this. It could be Disney Plus. I just feel like it might be time for them to revisit the structure. It works well for The Mandalorian when it's like, what's the adventure that they're doing this time? Mm-hmm. But for things like Obi-Wan, I thought Ahsoka handled it pretty well. I think this show's handling it pretty well.
Yeah.
But I think the format itself just doesn't lend itself to... It's not ideal, I feel like.
I agree.
So, yeah. I don't complain often, but that's
this
one
is
of
the biggest, most complaining you've done. It's usually me.
I know. And it's... I think it's over time. I recently recorded, and we'll release it probably after the Acolyte's over, like a 2 years later rewatch of Obi-Wan, and I did it by myself. I missed you, but sorry. I did just do it myself.
I know.
We'll get you. It's a new show. We'll talk about it. It's like rewatching stuff and revisiting it because I feel like today's way things are consumed or this is happening. All right, and then it's gone, and I haven't really thought about Obi-Wan much. But anyway, like the frustration is building over amount of time.
Rightfully so.
All right. Well, anything else to add?
No.
I asked you that already.
Do we know what the last finale title is?
We do not.
Do we think it'll be one word or two?
I think 2. I think they're going to come together.
What if it's 3?
That would be weird. Or if it's 1.
What if it's 1 that becomes 2 becomes 1?
The power of 2. I see it being called like the power of 2, isn't it? I don't know. Anyway, with that, thank you so much for listening. Please consider giving us a review or subscription on your podcast platform of your choice or on YouTube at Blue Shadow. We are trying to, do some additional YouTube stuff. Going to be posting some stuff with some Star Wars Legos. Mm-hmm. Trying to, keep us on both YouTube and podcasts. So please give us a follow on both places. Please consider giving us a follow on Twitter or X at Blue Shadow Pod. and on Instagram at Blue Shadow Podcast, as well as on our Facebook page, which is Blue Shadow. We've been posting some memes, so if you
We're trying our best. Yeah.
Trying. I think some are better than others. I usually, if I make one, I'll show it to my wife, and if she doesn't laugh, it kind of goes in the bottom of the barrel, and then the one she laughs at, I'll send to Dan, and Dan will send some over. So if you're interested, take a look.
Yes. And please, as Joey mentioned earlier, if you believe that Jedi are bad, tell us why.
Oh, God. We're going to have to do a phone line so I can start yelling at some people.
No, we're not going to yell. We're not going to be the Jedi and fall because of miscommunications.
The Jedi aren't bad.
They're not bad. They're not bad. I need that to be known. I think the Jedi are good. The ideals are good. They are flawed people who make flawed decisions. And I ruined it.
Yeah, the Jedi are... I mean, you're right, but you also asked people to tell us why they thought the Jedi are bad.
You literally said that in the beginning.
I said the Jedi are not bad.
You said tell us why they think...
I didn't say that. I said I've heard people say that.
You said tell us and maybe we can convince you.
Nah, tell us what you think. Anyway.
Or not.
No, please. We'd love to hear from you. Don't let my negativity...
I'll do the responses.
Yeah, we'll let Dan take care of it. Anyway, with that, thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time for the finale of The Acolyte.
See you next week.